Hello, Yakri here with another Dominions 4 video. Same drill as my last video on Dominions 4 Magic Schools. I'm not doing as much editing these days because I have less time and I want to still get content out there, right? For people. So today we're going to be going over Evocation. Let's start from the bottom. Let's talk about Evocation in general really quick. Evocation is mostly the providence of fire and air magic. There are other magical schools that benefit from Evocation. There's at least one really good arcane spell in there. There's some good water spells in there. There's a few good earth spells and some mixed school spells, but it's mostly fire and air that have like the big landmark spells that you're going to see that actually will significantly affect the game when you reach them, right? And the most notable ones are going to be Fireball and Thunderstrike. But we're going to go from level 1 upwards like we usually do, and talk about all the different spells that you're going to get as you go along. So, level 1, you get Flame Bolt, right? So that's your first fire spell that's actually going to be useful because it's long range, hits one person. It's not that great, but it does something. Many of the other spells here, like Fire Darts, many of these are not worth mentioning. Acid Spray, no, it's right, that's one of the close range ones. I want to say like Arcane Bolt. No, it's not. It's very niche use. Starfire is kind of is, because if you have arcane mages, now they can do something, anything when they have Starfires, which just does a little bit of a damage. It's armor negating magic damage. So it's not that bad. It's only one person, but it's better than having them, sit around doing nothing if for some reason you have arcane mages going around with your army. Cold Bolt, same thing as Flame Bolt, really. Geyser, I believe, is a little... No, it's like Flaming Hands, so it's not too great. Oh yeah, I already covered that. Okay, so that's it. That's pretty much the whole thing. I think Slime is actually, if I remember correctly, although it's magic resist negates, which is a bit of a problem because a lot of super combatants and thugs have high magic resistance, sliming enemies can actually be pretty useful if you have access to that. It's unusually useful for the fact that it's one water path and level 1 evocation, at least. It's not, like, generally powerful, but compared to a lot of the other options you have, it's so little research, it's pretty good. Level 2, we've got, I believe Sulfur Haze is a good one, Lightning Bolt, Rain, Rust Mist, and I guess I could throw in Count Vine Arrow as well. So, Sulfur Haze is a toxic cloud. It poisons units that pass through it. It's mainly really important if you have access to the fire-air pathing and you're mostly fire mages, right? Because it will hurt things that have immunity to fire. So if you're throwing fireballs around as your main thing, but you also have some air pathing, and you're like, well, what am I going to do about all these Abyssians on my doorstep? Sulfur Haze is one of the things you're going to use against them. Generally, you'd rather be throwing fireballs, but like I said, if they're resistant or is super resistant, like 30 fire resist to fire, Sulfur Haze could be a better bet, especially if you happen to have... Actually, I'm not sure there's any nation that also has that pathing and then also is toxic resistant, but if you were, that would be useful. Maybe you're playing in a custom game, or not custom game, modded game of some kind, more a mod nation that has that sort of situation, and then it could be very powerful. Lightning Bolt is just the standard, it's kind of like Firebolt, but for air magic. Maybe a little more comparable to Fireball, actually. Zaps one person for high damage, and then has a little minor fatigue shock around it. Not super powerful, but it's very high accuracy. And, if your mages are casting like 6 or 7 of them per battle, that's 6 or 7 troops that your mage probably just killed, no contest, unless they're giants or some other large type of troop that has, like, more than 20 hit points. Or, unless you're going up against troops with lightning resistance. It's also a good way to take out a single enemy by shocking them with a ton of lightning bolts because it's armor negating. So it's hard to defend against. The enemy combatant would need more than 15 lightning resistance to effectively survive it. Power resistance works. So, Rain. Rain is a kind of a versatile spell these days. Generally, it just helps nerf Abyssians, and it helps reduce the power of fire mages in general by making them fatigue out more quickly. Snow is... Yeah, so if you're in cold weather already, Rain is actually weaker. Rain is more powerful in warm weather, like neutral or hot heat scales. So like Heat 1 would be the place where you really want to cast Rain, because then you get its full effect, and it actually works against fire mages. You have to remember that if you're in cold weather, Rain will not actually help you against fire mages, just against heat auras. So keep that in mind. But it's still very good. It also puts out fires on units that would otherwise continue burning, I believe, which is not something it mentions in its description. So it can be very good if you're... I think it does it as snow too, but I could be wrong. So like as Niflheim, if you're attacking into the territory of a fire nation where they have warm scales, that's a really good spell to use. And if you're in cold weather, it can still be worth it because of your weakness to fire. Rust Mist destroys armor on the troops, right? It's not good against everyone, but against certain nations it's extremely good, like versus Middle Ulm. So it's one of those things where you have to evaluate what kind of nation you're facing and what kind of nation you are. If your nation does not have a lot of armor and their nation does, that's the time to just spam Rust Mist, because it will comparatively give you a large advantage. Because keep in mind, it can hit your troops as well. So if you're Middle Ulm and you're dropping Rust Mist everywhere, it's probably going to benefit your opponent more than it will you. Vine Arrow, this is for fighting super combatants and thugs, because it roots, I can't remember the exact effects of Entangle, but it reduces the defenses of whoever is entangled, makes them easier to hit. It might give units the ability to crit on them, I'm not sure. And if you don't remember from earlier, critting is reduces the protection value of a unit by half. So Vine Arrow is useful for taking out big single units. Can even be useful against pretenders and the like too. Although I believe units with high strength can get out of it easier. I could be wrong, but it's still good. It also does actually okay damage too. So if you're into nature magic and you need to deal with thugs, it's one of the few ways you're going to be able to do it. Now, here we come into some of our powerhouse spells, or one of the first ones, Fireball being the key thing here, right? Large area heat shock. Does it say how large? I believe it's... God, how many squares is that? 5 squares? It's pretty big. You'd have to look it up. You'd have to look it up on the Dom 4 Inspector to see exactly what the area of the large area heat shock is. It's one of the, or in the you can also look it up in the game manual. One of those things that's a little bit harder to tell about the game. The important thing to know about using this tactically is that if you have only 1 or 2 fire mages, Fireball isn't that great because it just hits one square, right? For good damage. But if you have a lot of fire mages, like 10 or 20 fire mages, it can become extremely effective against enemies that don't have heat resistance, because with that many fire mages, you're going to be pretty much covering the battlefield in this large area heat shock, which can cause enemy units to fatigue out. And keep in mind that in Dominions, as your fatigue increases, your defense skill goes down, and over 50 fatigue, you can be subject to critical hits. And over 100 fatigue, you're unconscious and helpless and will just get butchered. So the thing is that even if you don't render enemy troops unconscious, fatigue is still powerful if your own troops are fairly good. And this is how Abyssia works, right? They have heat auras, which will fatigue people out, and they also throw fireballs into their own troops, and the fireballs don't hurt their own troops at all, and they do hurt the enemy troops. And that's the key thing. Friendly fire is a real risk with this spell. So if you have at least heat resistance 5, this is a really good spell to spam all over the place. And if you also have a lot of chaff troops that you can allow to die to this, or if you have lightly armored troops that won't fatigue out as easily, it's also a good time to cast this. Or if you just have a smaller army and you can hold it really far back and then just hit the enemy troops with this to soften them up as much as possible. So that's a good thing to do. Let's see. Mist. Do I remember? Limits the precision of all spells. Yeah, Mist, if the enemy has a lot of ranged attacks and you don't, cast Mist, and then hope they hit themselves with friendly fire a lot. Acid Bolt is really good. Acid spells in general are super duper good, because acid damage is rare, resistance to acid damage is rare, and the damage is pretty good, and it also does area rust, so it'll take out armor as well. That makes all the acid spells really fantastic. I think later on we've got there's like an acid rain spell, and it's very, very good. The thing is that very few people have water fire pathing, or like opposition schools, so you're not going to get the opportunity to use it very often, but it is very effective. Freezing Mist is kind of like the toxic, something haze, the toxic clouds and fire clouds. There's a lot of different. It's one of the various cloud spells. This one just deals cold damage and does minor chill stun, which is, I believe, just more fatigue damage. So, badly hurt by the cold. You know, I don't know if 1 damage is really qualifies as badly hurt by the cold, but if you are immune to cold damage, or resist, or like have resist 5 cold and the enemy does not, that can be a safe spell to throw right into the middle of the battle and negatively impact your opponent's troops without worrying about friendly fire. Magma Bolts. Ah, this is great. Magma Bolts is probably not worth using actually over Fireball, I would say. It's a good spell. It's maybe almost as good as Fireball, but we're really waiting for this other spell a little bit later on that's fantastic. So let's see, what else is good at level 3? Sleep Cloud is good. Sleep Cloud, alright, I should rephrase that. Sleep Cloud is not that good, but Sleep Cloud, you have Sleep Cloud if you're air mages, and if you're, or nature mages, nature, if you're using nature magic, you have access to Sleep Cloud, and not much else. And in that context, Sleep Cloud is great. And often nature mages, and nations that have nature mages have other things to go with it that will make it better. Another one example is if you're playing Middle Age. Oh wow, I'm blanking on the nation's name right now. Crap. Okay, well, this is embarrassing, but you know, the zombie tree or zombie plant people nation that I can't remember the name of, and we'll probably remember in a few minutes. If you're playing Zombie Pangea, you can spam the hell out of this spell because none of your units are affected by it. You get access to nature magic, and your opponent's units, unless you're fighting Middle Airmore, are definitely affected by it. Well, magic resistance and negates, so they could resist it, but 46 fatigue damage is a lot. I should say that 46 fatigue damage is a lot of fatigue damage, right? It lasts 3 rounds. If it hits someone twice, they're almost unconscious. And if they're actually bothering to fight at the same time, they're definitely unconscious now. And that is really powerful. To have enemy troops just helpless like that, and it can really clog up a battlefield and allow your troops to just mow through the enemy. Let's see, it's also very effective if you're a nation like Pangea, because your troops have no real encumbrance because they're not wearing any armor. They're all running around naked. And 50, if let's say your troops get hit by it once, the enemy troops get hit by it once, and you're fighting Middle Ulm, well, Ulmish troops who have like 20 protection and like 8 encumbrance are going to be way more affected by suddenly gaining 50 fatigue than your Maenads with 0 encumbrance. I think it's 0 encumbrance, are going to suffer from that, especially since your troops are throwaway trash and their troops are valuable. So it's going to impact them a lot more if you drop that on them than it's going to impact you. And that's generally the idea. Play spells that you can play that'll impact your opponent and won't impact you if you suffer from friendly fire a bit, because that'll often happen. And many nations are designed so that they have access to the spells that they can use in that way, like Pangea and Zombie Pangea that I can't remember the name of because I'm fucking stupid. Okay, level 4 spells. Fire Cloud. It's like Sleep Cloud, but it's fire. Which actually makes it probably less useful, in my opinion. Fate of Oedipus. What's that? Oh yeah. This is a direct counter spell to a global spell. I'm gonna kind of gloss over it. If someone casts the Eyes of God global spell and you want to fuck with them, do that. You'll blind their mage and counter the spell, I believe. Does it say that? It says that, right? Will no longer observe the world. Yeah, it counters the spell. Yeah, it's great. It's great. It's probably not that good to do because that global spell is useful, but it's like not spending 70 fire gems to dispel it useful unless you're like in a war with the person who cast it and you just want to fuck with them. I want to say you can uncover. Well, scouting information is actually useful. It's more useful the better the player is, so keep that in mind. Thunderstrike. Now this is like one of the massive powerhouse spells of Evocation, and it's what makes Air Nations. A lot of people would say Air Nations and Air Magic are a little OP, and it's largely because of Thunderstrike. It's also because Air Magic gets great stuff in Alteration, which we already talked about, and they get okay stuff in Conjuration, which we already talked about, and they get good stuff in other areas that we're going to talk about in the future, like Construction, which is going to require me to probably stream the Dawn 4 Inspector instead of the game, unfortunately. Okay, so the deal with Thunderstrike is that it does massive damage. If you look here, it deals 26 magic damage plus 2 for every additional cast level your caster has, which is probably going to be 0 additional caster levels because it requires Air Magic 4, right? 3. Yeah, that's not that hard. And it's 26 damage though, and it's armor negating electrical damage. That's just a huge amount of damage. You're going to blast. It's gonna horribly maim giants. It's going to absolutely destroy an entire square of humans. No problem. It'll eat through super combatants if you actually hit them a couple times. The other thing is the Thundershock effect, which is huge. I believe it's like, I want to say it's like 15 squares across or something. It's I can't remember exactly, but it's a very, very, very large area of effect. And it deals stun damage, which we know is fatigue damage from earlier. And so the thing is, if you have like 10 mages casting this, you're going to quickly cover the whole battlefield, on the enemy side of the battlefield mostly, with fatigue damage effects, which is great for your army. It's fantastic for your army. You're also going to be taking out entire squares of enemy troops with every hit, if you actually hit their troops, which makes this spell a lot more effective the more troops the enemy has in the battlefield. Another thing to note is that although many spells are long range, this is range 100, so it's going to stretch all the way from your backlines to their backlines, which means that you can put your troops, or the main body of your troops, very far back, and still hit with these spells right at the start of the battle. The precision is not good, so it gets a big bonus from precision boosting effects, so Wind Guide would be one example. And because of that, also it's also one of the reasons it's more effective the more troops the enemy has on the battlefield, because you're going to be more likely to actually hit troops. So this is really good in two situations, and one is where the enemy has a few number of really high quality troops, because it does so much damage. Its effects are just so severe that if you're spamming a small number of high quality troops, a few hits can be devastating. And if the enemy has a huge number of troops, basically any spell you cast is going to be effective, and this spell will slaughter anything in its path and have a larger effect on the battle as long as the enemy doesn't have electrical resistance. So you need to remember that if they have electrical, or shock, yeah, it's shock in the minions, right? Shock resistance 5, they're not going to be affected by the stun effects. And that means that this is only going to be effective versus the troops it actually hits, which is a massive reduction in the effectiveness of the spell. You might even want to just spam Lightning Strike or something else, if they have that resistance. So keep that in mind. However, if they have a small number of troops, it still remains effective to spam the actual spell to kill them, because they're still going to be taking like 21 armor negating damage, which is pretty brutal even for very high HP units. Let's see, Hurricane, this stops, oh, this is one of the Unrest spells. We're not going to cover those. They're situationally useful sometimes. I feel like I should have a whole section covering rituals, but I'm gonna pretty much skip over rituals every time, unless I come across one that's like super important. Like in Conjuration, we're gonna have to cover a lot of rituals. If you need to fuck with an enemy's province for some important reason, it can be a good thing to do. It's probably more effective to do against blood hunting nations, because you can disrupt their blood hunting. But a lot of the time this costs, how many gems does this cost? Costs 5 air gems. A lot of the time the gems that these spells cost are much better spent elsewhere because they're so valuable. And now we get to Acid Rain. I love this spell. It's the damage, actually, I remember it being higher, but I was wrong. So the damage is not super high. However, the area of effect, 4+ area of effect, is actually enormous. And the rust effect, area rust effect, is particularly good. I believe that means it's going to be larger than the area that the spell covers. So if you're fighting heavily armored units, spamming the spell can be very effective, because at first it's going to rust their armor, and then their armor is going to break off, and then it's going to be doing its full amount of damage against unarmored units over a very large area of effect, and it's going to be softening them up for your troops. Another thing you could do is, if you have access to this magic pathing, you could cast Acid Rain for the first 2 rounds on all your mages, and then you could switch to other spells once you've rusted a ton of their armor and you don't want to hit your own troops with it too much. Okay, Blade Wind. This is an earth spell. This is good for one thing and one thing only. Well, sometimes it's the only thing you're going to be able to cast, and then it's, you know, the only thing you can cast, right? You throw a whirling blade. Yeah, I mean, look at the spell description. You throw a huge swarm of whirling blades towards your enemies. It looks cool, as much as anything can look cool in Dominion's graphics. You throw just a ridiculous number of shit at people, and it's increased by 3 for every caster level, so with Summon Earth Power, it's not too hard to have 1 or 2 caster levels higher. There's a lot of big Earth mages in the game than this requires, and what it's good for is killing unarmored or lightly armored troops. Deals 14 slashing damage, which means if you hit unarmored troops, it's going to be cutting off their limbs, it's going to be killing them instantly. It can be hugely effective for just scything through like maenads and stuff. If the enemy has really covered a battlefield in troops, and they're all lightly armored humanoid troops, then you're going to probably get like 40 kills with this thing when you cast it. So it's very good. And even with Precision 0, keep in mind that if there's only one enemy on the battlefield, the projectiles will all be aimed at that person. And so have had cases where someone has sent a thug at me, and then one of my Earth mages is about to get beat down by the thug, and they cast this, and 40 blades just slice into the person's face for about 100 damage instantaneously, killing them. Well, so it's a semi-versatile spell. The thing is that if you're facing like Ulm, again, they're a great example because they're just my go-to heavy armor example. If you're facing guys who have 18 to 21 protection on their units, this is going to just bounce off them. It's going to be even worse. The Blade Wind projectiles behave a bit like their arrows, I believe. So if they have shields, so if you're facing people with tower shields and 21 protection, this is going to do nothing to them. So, and it's very, very fatigue intensive. So just keep that in mind. You know, if you're facing Ulm, if you're facing, I don't know, late age Marignon or late age Agartha, this spell is not going to do anything. It's just a waste of time to cast it. There are a few other nations that have enough armor for it to be ineffective, like late age Pangea, actually, depending on the units they're using. So just remember that. I believe a lot of undead slashing resistant. Some units are slashing resistant, so check if the enemy units are slashing resistant. That will also make it far less effective. Units with like 15 armor and slashing resistance are going to take no damage from that spell. Okay, let's see. Nether Bolt, Banefire Darts. I think I need to cover both of those, actually. Nether Bolts are great because they feeble-mind people, and the feeble-minded effect is an area of effect. So, it's dangerous because you can hit your own troops with it, and it's super bad. But if you want to try and fuck with the enemy's mages, this is a great spell. If the enemy's power is in their mages, or if they've got thugs, this is great against thugs, because although they're likely to succeed in the magic resistance check, if they fail, they're going to be wrecked, right? Feeble-minded removes your ability to cast spells. So if you hit a spellcaster or any unit that is valuable because it can cast spells, with this effect, you're essentially killing it, or making it dead weight, really, because they're still going to have to pay upkeep on that unit. In the case of thugs, it may not always be as bad as actually killing them, because they won't lose the magical items that they may have created for the thug, but it's still a very effective way to clear out powerful enemy units, spellcasters in particular. I believe it also has negative effects on enemy troops that make them worse at fighting as well, because, you know, they're actually mentally disabled after they get hit with that, and so they're less good at wielding swords. So it's generally a good spell to spam. Specifically, I believe a few nations are really good at spamming it, like I think Solaria is like the key Nether Dart spammer. Banefire Darts, great for different reasons. These have an area of decay effect, really effective when you're undead and your opponents aren't, or when your opponents have high quality troops and you have chaff. It's not effective specifically versus troops that live a long time, like elves, but because because it makes them age rapidly, right? So units that can be very, very old without dying aren't super affected by that. However, humans are brutally affected by that, and nations like Middle Marignon that have very old human mages are easily crippled by this spell. It also does good damage, and excuse me, is a precursor to Banefire that we're going to be coming across a little later. Let's see, Bolt of Unlife. This, like, if it kills someone, it turns them into a skeleton, but it's mostly pretty bad. I think it costs a gem. It doesn't. Oh, you can like kill someone and raise them as a zombie, but it's cool. Once in a while, you'll have nothing else to cast as a death mage, but it's pretty bad. Overall. Falling fires. This is kind of worth mentioning. Fireballs are often better because of the heat shock. However, this is an area of effect 3+, deals good damage. So if you just need to clear out a large number of troops, especially if you're facing like Maenads, units that don't have a lot of armor, so they aren't really affected by heat shock, even if they aren't resistant, and can be easily killed in a single casting of a spell like Falling Fires, then it's better to cast Falling Fires, especially if your own troops are heat resistant, as there's a substantial risk of friendly fire. Orb Lightning. This is kind of a niche spell, but I want to mention it. You get more Orbs of Lightning the higher your air pathing is, and it's air pathing 1. So air path 1 mages can cast this, and it's an okay spell for them to cast. But if you have an air path 4 mage casting this, he's going to be casting effectively like 4 slightly weaker lightning bolts with a small area shock effect. This is kind of niche. I'm not sure what the niche really is, actually. Maybe I should say it's just useless. I think you could use this effectively on thugs, because if you get like 4 lightning bolts at 10 armor negating damage, it's actually like 40 armor negating damage in a single round, and the fatigue cost is really, really low. So if you want to spam this a few times before getting into melee combat range, right, on a thug or something, versus another thug, it can be very effective. Yeah, I think that's the main thing. The fatigue cost, it's not going to be as effective as Thunderstrike. It's not even as effective as Lightning Bolt unless you're magic like pathing like 3, air pathing 3. But the fatigue cost is really low, and if you're higher than 1 air pathing, the fatigue cost is essentially whatever your encumbrance is. So that is some definite benefits to this. Oh, and this is the thing that makes this is actually an interesting thing to mention. So this effectively gives everyone windshield. It just causes some arrows fired to be lost. It actually cursed any projectiles. So slingstones, arrows, javelins, whatever, they just poof. Some of the time, it rains if it's warm, and that does the whole fire fatigue thing. So that's great versus fire mages. I think. I want to say it reduces accuracy, but maybe it doesn't. It stops flying units from flying unless they have flying storms, so Kalom often ignores this, but it can be useful versus a variety of flying units. And it empowers Thunderstrike. Oh, shit. Alright. I probably should have looked up how it empowers Thunderstrike for this, because it's kind of important. But suffice it to say that Thunderstrike becomes substantially better if you also cast Storm, because it has a special interaction with Storm. Which is why it's so stupidly good, because it's good without Storm, but it becomes even better with Storm. I think it has an additional stun shock area. I think that's what it is, or it increases the damage, or both. Yeah. Oh. I might annotate that later with what the effect is when I have time to check. Area. So this is kind of your I wish I had fire or lightning magic frost spell. Falling Frost is actually pretty good. The area of effect in particular is enormous, so the precision is terrible. So it's very, very good if you have a lot of cold resistant units. Like if you're playing Niflheim against a nation that doesn't have frost resistance as well, this is a really great spell to be spamming, because it's not going to affect your troops too much. And it's going to affect the enemy troops a lot, especially versus human nations. Like, this is one of the reasons human nations have a hard time in the early era. Like, if you're fighting Arcosophail and you're just dropping these like 17 cold magic damage spells on them, and they're not gonna have a good day with that. And your troops won't really be affected by it. Marverni would probably be even worse for them because they have a lot of lightly armored units and it's not armor-piercing damage. Gifts from Heaven. This is also a really notable spell. Because of the damage numbers, as you can see, it deals 150 damage and it has 3 effects, and they each clear out a square. They deal 150 damage to an entire square. So there are very few units that have more than 150 health. So this is generally considered a way to deal with really high-quality units like Sacreds. I think, excuse me, especially regenerating Sacred stuff like Nephil Giants and stuff. They're gonna have like 60 hit points and regenerate a lot of the time. Or Thugs, sometimes Thugs. The accuracy is terrible, so it's kind of a gamble to try and use this against Thugs and super combatants, but if you do hit them, you will almost definitely kill them. Versus massed armies that have a lot of Sacreds interspersed into them, this is a very good spell, because you'll be able to take out those high-quality units very effectively, and if you happen to hit anything else, it will also be obliterated. You have to be careful about friendly fire for the same reason. It's very inaccurate, and the damage is massive. Now let's talk about Earthquake. This is one of the battlefield clear spells. It affects the entire battlefield. The damage is not very high, but it is armor piercing. And it has an extra effect if you cast it underground. So what this is really for is being cast multiple times in the same battle versus lightly armored troops. So if you're fighting Middle Pangea, for example, and they have all these Maenads, they have like 1,000 Maenads on the battlefield. Well, if you can cast this before they armor up the Maenads especially, they're going to have 10 or less protection, which means they're going to take somewhere between 4 and 8 damage from this spell, and they have like 9, 10 hit points. So if you can drop this spell on them twice, they're probably all going to die. If you can drop it 3 times, they're for sure all going to die, barring really high-level alteration spells that give them like 20 protection. Which, you know, that does happen eventually, but depending on your research priorities and how well you research, you should be able to cast this against your opponents when it's going to be effective against them, at least some of the time. In particular, this is also really good if you are playing Calum. Can't remember which era of Calum can easily cast this. I want to say it's middle era Calum, but one of the areas of Calum can cast this effectively, and since they have flying units almost entirely, and flying units are immune to Earthquake, they can fly in their army, cast Earthquake 2 or 3 times to start the battle, and then jump on your ass. So that's a pretty good strategy. It can also be a good strategy for them to even take a pretender that can cast Earthquake so that the pretender can wake up from dormant and go into battle and cast Earthquake with all these flying units that aren't affected by Earthquake, which can be really good. There are also some ways to grant flying or levitation to some of your units so that they're not affected by Earthquake and then Earthquake the battlefield, so that can be a good strategy as well. The key thing to keep in mind is that if you're playing as a human army versus another human army, and you don't have any way to protect yourself from Earthquake, and you just start casting Earthquake, you're going to do a lot of damage to your own army. So, you know, you should have some sort of plan or strategy where you don't care about your own army dying, or you don't have much of an army there to die. Stellar Cascades. This is actually a really important spell as well. So this is like the core astral. I need to deal with something. I don't really have a good way to do it. So this is my best bet. It's armor piercing, it's stun damage, and here's the important thing: it does not. You cannot resist it with magic resistance. Pretty much everything that Arcane does can be resisted with magic resistance. So here's the thing: this works versus everybody. If you need to deal with thugs, if you need to deal with large armies, because it has a large area of effect, if you need to deal with high quality armies, you can deal with anything as long as you have enough people casting this and some army to back them up, because it's very difficult to kill units just with fatigue damage. You can do it, don't get me wrong, you can, especially if there's not too many of them, but versus anything other than a single thug, you're going to need army backup. And it's always going to be more effective if you have some troops to back up all this fatigue damage. It's especially effective if your troops backing it up are like undead, because they're not really affected by fatigue. Not as much anyway. It can be good versus enemy casters as well, because fatiguing them out stops them from casting anymore. So it's just a great spell in general. The downsides are that it's astral. Not everyone gets access to easy to spam astral mages. And it's very high research, so you need to rush it pretty hard if you want to get it while it's still going to be very helpful to you. And those are pretty much the limitations. It also is only range 30, so it's possible for your opponents to abuse that. Like if you're fighting Calum, they can just start way in the back, then fly over to you, and so, you know, round 1 you can't reach them, and then round 2 they're all over your mages. So that's something to be aware of. Astral Geyser is kind of interesting. You wouldn't use it normally, but it will horror mark units, which can be useful if you want to try using horrors. You can horror mark units with Astral Geyser, then summon horrors and let them go to town after you've horror marked a lot of the enemy units to keep the horrors off of your army. Horrors are very dangerous, and so can be useful for that. The downside is that if you don't astral mark enough people, eventually they're going to start murdering your army. So you can see how it can be hard to get much use out of it. It's also possible that depending on the type of mages your opponents have, they'll just kill the horrors actually without too much trouble. And then you're going to put in a lot of effort for that for no reason. I feel like, oh no, it is a little bit higher here. Okay, so Wrathful Skies. What do we need to cover here? Flame Eruption. It's just like a super powerful version of Burning Hands. Not that interesting. Let's see. Lightning strikes all over the field. So Wrathful Skies make lightning bolts just hit units at random all over the battlefield. It's only really good if after you cast Storm. And it's only really good if your units have a lot of lightning resistance, or you don't care about your units. Kind of the same deal as Earthquake. It's probably going to zap the shit out of your troops as well as the enemy troops, so you need to make sure that you're in the right kind of situation where that will actually benefit you more than it benefits them. And this causes Storm everywhere. Really useful if you have Flying and Storm, if you don't have Flying at all, and if you have a lot of air magic, which you probably do if you're casting this, but the main thing would be that you can now cast Thunderstrike in any battle without casting Storm first, because there's storms everywhere. It's also particularly good if you don't have any kind of decent ranged attacks, you don't have any good archers, because it makes, you know, like it says, it makes shooting in battle very difficult. It just straight up makes a lot of projectiles vanish, so if you aren't shooting anyway, that's only good for you. Let's see, Cleansing Water, this is like an anti-undead, yeah, anti-undead and demon spell. It's really good though, like the area of effect 4+, it's pretty good for a water 2 spell. Takes like no fatigue and deals, well, it's not that much damage, but it's armor negating, so it's always gonna work. It won't damage anything except undead or demons. However, versus a lot of blood nations that are summoning hordes of demons, or versus nations like Airmore, this can be a really effective spell to just clear out large numbers of troops, especially large numbers of chaff units like Airmore might have, or, shit, I still can't remember the name of Zombie Pangea. That's driving me nuts now. Okay. Magma Eruption. This is, it's not too many nations that really get to use this. I think it's Middle Age Ulm and Middle Age Agartha. I think Middle Age Agartha can do it as well. Pretty effectively. This is a great spell to spam when you have heavily armored troops. The lingering heat effect here is like a heat shock cloud that just has a mild heat fatigue effect around the area this impacts. The really important thing here is it affects 5+ squares. That's a lot of squares, and a lot of mages that can cast this will be able to get, well, I don't know, you'll have at least, many nations that can cast this will at least have access to a few Earth 3 mages who will be able to Earth power themselves up to Earth 4. Then you could always put Earth Boots on them, and you'll have a mage who will use generate almost no fatigue while casting this spell. And they'll affect an area of 7 with each cast, dealing great damage. The thing to remember is blunt damage. So this is not very effective versus heavily armored troops, hence why it's great if your troops are heavily armored. If you're playing Middle Ulm and you're going up against Pangea, and you hit your own troops with this, they might take 2 or 3 damage, whereas any of Pangea's Maenads or Satyrs will probably die instantly. So that can be very helpful in the use of this. Now, there are some drawbacks. One is that the range is only 25, which is pretty short. Another is that the research cost for getting to this is pretty high. And so you have a narrow window of opportunity, usually, when you first get this spell to utilize it to its maximum effectiveness before other nations hit key research goals that will make them much more resistant to this type of spell, or will get them access to even more powerful spells like Rain of Stones for just clearing out an entire battlefield. So getting a research lead can be very important if you want to use a magma eruption strategy, if you're playing a nation like Middle Ulm that pretty much has to use a magma eruption strategy. So keep that in mind. Astral Fires, I think this is... New Flames? So it's an area of effect. Oh, this is actually, you know, I think this spell might be better than I have given it credit for in the past, actually. It's magic resistant negates, so that's pretty bad actually, because a lot of the time your spell's just gonna whiff. But when it doesn't whiff, 10 armor negating damage over area of effect 4+ at range 40+, that's pretty good, with precision 100. This would be a great spell to cast versus Middle Ulm or other heavily armored nations. Middle Ulm is a particularly good example because they have a national quirk where they are weak to magic, or they have low magic resistance. And if they don't do something to counter that, which they can, but if they don't, then that sort of spell will be a lot more effective on them than it will be on other people. But you still might be better off throwing fireballs and fatiguing them out. But it's an alternative path. Mind Hunt is a useful ritual. It's pretty much used for killing spies. You find people and you murder them with your mind. I think it's Mind Burner, Soul Slay, depending on which spell the caster knows. So you probably want to have Soul Slay available, so you'll definitely kill whoever you find with Mind Hunt. You have an Astral Mage, you cast this on a province, and if there's an enemy in that province, an enemy commander in that province, you'll try and murder them. You can use this to kill the commanders of armies, as long as the army doesn't have an Astral Mage, because if you run into another Astral Mage, it's possible your mage will get feeble-minded. Now, if you have a way to heal feeble-minded, like you say have an immortal pretender who has astral magic, and he has very high astral magic, it can be beneficial to just mind hunt right into enemy astral mages in attempts to kill them, and that can actually pay off for you. So it's something to keep in mind. But if you don't have a way to heal feeble-minded, be very careful about where you cast this spell, or you could end up getting a very powerful astral mage that you have feeble-minded without much benefit for you. So this outright just kills enemy units in provinces where you have Dominion. It's a very good defensive spell these days. It's hard to push Dominion onto enemy players most of the time now, so I wouldn't necessarily expect to be able to do that with this anymore, although it's been a strategy in the past. However, if enemies are attacking into your territory, they are going to have a big problem dealing with this enchantment, especially if you have Turmoil Scales. And that's pretty much all there is to it. It just passively kills units while they're in your territory. It makes you very difficult to invade. So I'd say it's a pretty good global spell overall. Let's see, where are we at? Wrath of God, but it's also pretty difficult to cast. Blast of Unlife, I believe this is the area of effect version of raising people to Soulless Warrior. Still not a big fan of it. Armor, it's magic resistance negates, which is less than ideal, and the damage is okay. Like you have better things to do with your death magic mages, like summoning hordes of skeletons. We're going to talk about that in later videos on different magic schools, but that's the long and short of it. These spells, it's not that it's totally terrible, but if you have access to that kind of pathing, you're probably going to research other spells that are better. Banefire is an enormously good spell in two types of situations. One, where you, kind of like with Thunderstrike, if you need to kill really high quality units, this is great. It's 55 armor piercing damage. That is insane. Yeah, it's going to horribly maim or kill whatever it hits. The precision is not great, but it's not terrible. It's not a precision penalty, at least, which is actually really decent for the type of spell it is. And the really big benefit, though, is the large area decay effect. If your opponents are human, this is going to be very good versus them. If they're other, like, medium-length lived races, like if they're Bakemono, if they're if they're like centaurs, you know, so Pangea, this is going to be great. If they're undead or elves, this is a little lackluster. You might be better off spamming something else, maybe just using your death magic pathing to summon skeletons. But versus human nations, this is a brutal spell. Large area decay is very powerful, and it will weaken enemy troops in battle as well as ensure that many of them die out of battle later. Failing winds. Ah, yeah. Alright. This is extremely powerful, but probably not versus flying troops. So this is a horrible morale effect in the sense that it's like really bad for your opponents. The main downside for you is that this spell is very hard to cast, and it's very hard to research to cast. But if you've researched it and you can cast it, often people will take a pretender that has the pathing to do this. It'll be such a severe morale penalty that if the battle is going even sort of okay for you, the enemy troops are going to break and run. And while they're breaking and running, you can murder them all. It's actually especially effective when you are a flying nation, so that you can fly after their troops and slaughter them as they're trying to escape. Now, if you're facing a nation like Calum, when their morale breaks, they tend to just immediately poof off the battlefield, which, unless they're deep in your territory, is not super great for you, because they mostly just escape, and it's not a very good way to win a battle. So keep that in mind. If they are deep in your territory, of course, and you've closed off their escape route, like for example, if you attack behind them in the same turn and make sure that they have nowhere to retreat to, it'll kill all of their troops, and so it's very effective. But you need to be aware of how you're using it, and make sure that you get the most benefit you possibly can out of causing their troops to retreat, because just making their troops run away a bunch of times without actually killing them is not a winning tactic, you know, more of a strategy that buys you time. And if it's not helping you win, they could pull up more troops, more armies, and then invade you from multiple directions, so that you can't as easily bring your big bad mage who can cast the spell around to deal with them. It's much better if you can actually catch and crush one of their armies unexpectedly with this. So keep that in mind when you're planning how to use it. It's one of those things where the enemy can change their tactics to avoid being defeated by it once they know you've got it online and available. But if you surprise them with it, you could just win your fight against whatever nation that is that you surprise with it. And depending on how they communicate with other players in the game, you might be able to use it once per player in the game, which could win you the whole game. Let's see. Streams of Life, not that impressive. Let's move on to later tier spells. Now, most of the later tier spells in Evocation are pretty bad, or at the very least, if they're not outright terrible, they're just not super relevant by the time you get them. So we're going to gloss over a lot of these in the interest of making this video not like 2 or 3 hours long. But I want to talk about a few of the level 7 spells in detail first. So we'll go over Firestorm really quickly. It's just... oh, it's the Battlefield enchantment one. Oh, I thought this was a different spell. Deals fire damage over time to everyone on the battlefield. This is a great spell if you are Abyssia, and if you're not Abyssia, it's a great spell if you have like a small stopping force that are going to die slowly to this, and a mage that's not going to die to the effect, and you just put them in the way of a big army and cast that spell and see how many of their troops you can kill or maim before your tiny little scout force is killed. But other than that, I wouldn't recommend using it. Maybe if you already have Alteration 9 and you cast Army of Gold on yourself first, that could be a good idea. The thing is, you know, it's one of the spells that hurts everyone on the battlefield, so you should be trying to find a way to make sure it won't hurt you, but it will hurt your opponent, and then use it. Shimmering Field. This is a little bit better, because it's armor negating shock damage. And it's not battlefield-wide, it's just area of effect enormous. This is really good if you have about shock resistance 5 on basically all of your troops. There are a few nations that do, and so what you'll do is you'll hold your troops back as much as possible, and you will cast this a few times, and you'll combine it with Storm and Thunder Strikes, and it's going to really rip apart the enemy army. It's especially good at dealing, again, with chaff strategies like Maenad and whatnot, because 10 damage over the effect of the entire battlefield is, or well, not the effect of the entire battle, 50 effect, so most of the battlefield is going to kill most troops that have 10 hit points or so. And if your troops have like 5 or 6 if your troops have more HP than human HP, like if your troops have like 15 hit points, and they've got like shock resistance 5, they might be able to survive one or two casts of this. And if you hold your troops really far back, and you put the mage that's a couple mages suicidally casting this really far forward, and maybe in the same turn enhance their accuracy, there's a good chance that you won't hit too many of your troops with this, but you'll hit all or most of the enemy troops with this, and that's how you can maximize your benefit from this spell. Okay, so what else do we need to talk about? Ice Strike, not that important. Acid Storm, this is, oh yeah, battlefield-wide acid rain spell. We already know what acid rain does. It's gonna be bad for both of you. I'd probably say it's another like one like Firestorm, where you put a little stopping force. You expect your troops to die, but you hope that killing a lot of their troops and killing a lot of your troops will be a net benefit for you. Let's see, Murdering Winter. This is pretty much good for, oh no, this is the province. This is the ritual. Okay, so if an enemy is in a cold 3 province, and you cast Murdering Winter on them, it's fairly effective at killing a lot of their troops if they don't have cold resistance. So this is a spell to cast as like Niflheim against other nations that are like heat friendly or something, that are invading your territory, or you can cast other spells to reduce the scales in their province first to be very cold, and then cast Murdering Winter. It's kind of one of those ones where it doesn't necessarily pay off too well, but it's good versus human troops. And if you don't have many other options to soften up their army to a point where you can deal with it first, you know, it's better than nothing. Rain of Stones. This is one of the game-shaping spells. Battlefield-wide, 14 damage bludgeoning. And so what this means is that if it hits people on the head, it'll deal double damage, which is 28 damage bludgeoning, which is going to kill most people. So most people who don't wear hats, right? So this is the whole, like, nations that don't wear hats are bad because someone can rush Rain of Stones, and if their army wears hats and the other army does not wear hats, they're gonna have a bad day. Like, using this against Middle Ulm isn't super effective because they wear hats, and their hats have like 20 protection, and so when they get hit in the head by this, sometimes they don't take any damage at all. And when they don't get hit in the head by this, they basically never take any damage. Whereas nations like Pangea, when they get hit by this, they all die. Everybody dies. Undead nations, also everybody dies. So if you're a nation that does not wear hats, this is a spell to be careful of. If you're a nation that can cast this, this is a spell where you want to think about, how can I maximally benefit from this? Like, one thing to do is cast Fog Warriors, make your whole army into mist form, right? So they're only going to take, your army will take 1 damage from this spell at most, and the enemy army will take full damage from the spell, and then you cast it like 3 or 4 times. That is a really good way to soften up an enemy army. And sometimes these will hit your army hard enough to break their mist form, but you will definitely not lose as much as the enemy army has. If you have really high level alteration, you could also do stuff like cast Army of Gold or Army of Lead and then cast this spell. You could do stuff like have 5 mages going on a suicide mission and cast this spell immediately and then all die. That's perfectly acceptable sometimes, because maybe you go in against an army where the enemy has 20 mages and mages tend not to wear hats, and you kill all 20 of their mages for 5 of your mages, and that's a very good trade. I'd be more than willing to make that, and I've in fact lost games to people doing stuff like that to me, so I can attest that it's a very good strategy. If you play a lot of modded games, they've probably changed how Rain of Stones works, because it's a very contentious spell as to whether it should be better, or well, not better, whether or not it should be worse or removed, or how it should be limited, or whether or not it really matters that much. I will say that it's very important if you're a nation that has this pathing, and Middle Ulm can actually cast this spell. So one of the notes, if you're Middle Ulm, if you're a nation that has this pathing, it's an important spell to be mindful of, because you will probably have an opportunity to leverage it, because it's very versatile and very powerful. Nether Darts. This is more area of effect feeble-minded, but you spray them out. This is a really powerful spell, and it's well worth rushing for a nation like Solaria that can spam it. Like 15 plus effects, 15 plus darts that cause area of effect feeble-minded and do good damage. That's very powerful. I don't think that needs any more explaining than what I already talked about with the previous version of the spell. This is just a better version. It requires very little pathing, and it's extremely powerful. Stygian Rains, entire battlefield. What does this do? Oh yeah, it gives everyone invulnerability. That's right. This is really good to do if your army has magical weapons and the enemy army does not. So you can also cast Weapons of Sharpness in combination with this. And all your troops have invulnerability, and it works for them, but your troops also all have magical weapons, so the invulnerability that your enemies also get does not work for them. And that's a way you can leverage the spell. Overall, I can't remember exactly how much invulnerability it is. I think it's invulnerability 15. If I'm wrong, it's invulnerability 20. It's actually pretty good. If it's invulnerability 15, I'm less impressed. There's not a lot of nations that are going to be able to make use of that. But if you can find a way, you know, more power to you. I'm not the ultimate master of dominions, so I don't know everything. Cloud of Death. I believe this is very similar to the other cloud spells. Yes. Okay, so it's just like the other cloud spells, except it's unusually large area of effect, and the damage can be resisted with magic resistance. And the damage is kind of low. Okay. Wind of Death. What was this one? I don't actually remember. The effects of it gives everyone disease. I think it kills people over the course of the actual battle. So this is really good to cast if your nation is undead, or if you want to surprise someone with a suicide mage death squad. It's a good spell to cast. Otherwise, stay away from that. I mean, you don't want to hit your own army with that kind of spell. It's very bad for you. Pillar of Fire. All right, so this is kind of like the Fire Mage's version of Thunderstrike. Downside for Fire Mages, you get it at Research 8. Yeah, it's one of the few really good later level spells, though. I can say this spell is very good at the level you get it at. 34 plus heat damage is so much heat damage that heat resistance won't protect you from it, and a large area heat shock makes this spell extremely effective against nations that don't have at least that 5 fire resistance. Second Sun, it's an enchantment that makes the whole world hotter. We're not gonna. It's kind of bad. We're not gonna cover it too much. Well, I think there's some weird uses for it with Jabalba. Maelstrom sucks stuff in the sea. Let's see. Oh yeah, this is the water magic gem creation. Magic gem creation enchantment. Astral Tempest is a battlefield spell. Let's see. Oh yeah, this deals damage to units who aren't mindless over time. So like every turn, I don't remember how much damage it is, but it's just a little bit of damage every turn, and it'll eventually kill everyone on the battlefield though. If they're not mindless. It can be good to cast if you have an undead army, or if you're, again, Suicide Squad Mage Tactics, Vortex of Unlife. This is another version of the Raise Enemies as Zombie spell. Finally, this version is actually kind of good. If you're chucking this, it's only fatigue cost 20, if you're chucking this into a huge horde of enemies, you're actually going to get a decent, especially if they're human enemies, you're actually going to get a decent number of zombies out of each cast. You might even get like 10 or 20. There's probably, again, it's like one of these things where like it keeps scaling up and it gets a little better each time, but you could probably find something better to do with your death mages. Volcanic Eruption, this just like destroys, yeah, this is one of the most brutal province attack spells. You can cast it 3 times, the province is basically toast. Otherwise, there's not much useful about it, but it's if you want to screw up people's sources of income, it can be actually pretty good. 15 fire gems for that, I would use it. It's one of the few ones I would definitely use if I thought it could benefit me, or if I thought sabotaging enemies' provinces would actually benefit me at all. This is another remote attack. Let's see. So it just hits half the enemy army for 15 fire damage. This is actually brutally effective. If the enemy army is like demons and or Abyssians, then you're not gonna have a good time. Like, I could easily see like this late in the game, someone could have an army filled with like demon knights, and then no, I would not actually expect flames from the sky to brutally murder half the enemy army. But you know, if somehow like Marverni got to the late game like that, you could totally ruin their day with that spell. Flamestorm. Is this the? Oh yeah, this is this is the fire version of affect half the battlefield with fire. All right, it's the damage is actually lackluster. I'd probably just spam a lot of Pillar of Fire, but it does affect 40 area. It's just the chaff clear spell. When Celeria comes at you with like 20,000 undead, this is what you cast. Needful Flames, this is just a cold version of that, but it has less area of effect, and it's less good because water is bad at battle magic. Yep, that's pretty much the whole story there. Okay, these, okay, I forgot Celestial Rainbows, like up in here. Celestial Rainbows, it's kind of neat. It gives you luck and then starts generating, or protects the hot. Oh yeah, this is the global enchantment that protects your provinces from hostile spells. This is actually pretty good, especially if you have luck 3 already, so that you'll just have protection over your whole nation. If you actually have the opportunity to cast it, it's absolutely useful this late in the game because there are so many rituals people could use against you. That said, that huge amount of water nature magic, you're only really going to have that on a pretender. So maybe if you had a water nature bless, you would do this. Otherwise, probably not. Tidal Wave, I think this is another province destruction spell. Yeah, it's a little bit more powerful than Volcanic Eruption, but of course, like I guess it's just because water mages, you know, it's one of the things where water gets an advantage in. Strands of Arcane Power. This one is really good, isn't it? Let's see. Of the sense and effect magic. Enemy mages. Oh, I think this is one where you mind attack. Okay, yeah. This is the one where you just attack, you mind burn other mages anywhere where you have Dominion. So the thing is that you need to cast this from an Arcane or Astral 9 mage. Like, for one, it requires very high Astral. For another, if you're not Astral 9, your mage is going to die pretty quickly from you attempting this, or become feeble-minded anyway. The other thing is that if you're casting it from an Astral 9 mage, there are a lot of great things you can do with an Astral 9 mage, and I don't necessarily want to risk my Astral 9 mage getting feeble-minded like that. If you have a way to, if you have healers, if you have for sure a way to repair the feeble-minded effect, it could be worth casting. I think it ends if your mage becomes feeble-minded, though, which, yeah, it ends if your caster becomes feeble-minded. So I want to say this is actually just a bad enchantment, but maybe you can find a use for it. Also, I remember the name of Zombie Pangea. It's Asphodel. Asphodel. That's why I wanted to say Arcosphale the whole time. Asphodel. They are the zombie plant people, and they can get really good use out of fatigue effects like Sleep Cloud. Especially since they have a lot of other fatigue stuff already. So that concludes Evocation. This has probably been way too long. I wish I could make it more concise somehow, but you know, it's actually a lot of content to wade through. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you noticed any mistakes I made or want to offer any constructive criticism, please do. Especially for mistakes, I can add annotations to the video to correct them, because, you know, it's nice to clear those up so I'm not spreading misinformation by accident. And I'll be doing more videos soon. Construction should be an interesting challenge since I won't be able to do it in-game. Alright, thank you for watching.